Do you ever have trouble trying to figure out if that fabric's going to work for the pattern that you're planning? Or maybe you want to add two different prints and you're just not sure you can imagine it. Or maybe you're designing a capsule wardrobe and you'd like to see all of the garments in one place on your page. Well, I used to like take a little picture, photocopy the pattern, and cut away all the white bits and then kind of hold it up like a window from far away, looking through it at my fabric to kind of see. And this little thing I have for you today is probably going to be way more fun, way more versatile, and reusable. And you can keep these little files and do them over and over for your favorite garments. Shout out to Ellie Folks Sews, who I saw post this tip on Instagram and definitely inspired me to give it a go. And now I'm all about trying it myself. So I hope you enjoy this interesting little tutorial I have for you today. Have fun. Hi, I'm Sarami, and usually you see me sewing here, but today I have a fun little tutorial on how to interview fabrics for a pattern that maybe you're struggling to decide, is that the right fabric for that pattern? And I'm going to show you a really quick way to do that using Procreate, which is an iPad app. There is actually a pocket version of this for an iPhone as well, and maybe for Android. I'm not even sure. Sorry about that. So I use an iPad and I use an iPad pencil, but the pencil is optional. And you just need some photos of some fabrics and a picture of the pattern that you're thinking about doing. And it can be any version of that picture. You can just be the back of the pattern envelope. It can be a stylized picture. It can be a photograph. It doesn't matter. It just depends on what you want. So, all right, so let's get going here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a canvas, and I'm just going to use one that's 12 by 12 inches at 500 DPI. And now I'm going to, first thing I'm going to do is put in the pattern that I'm interested in. So I'm going to use one that is a sketch of one that I did here in Procreate right here. This is a jammy top that I want to make a bunch of, and I have all these knits. And these knits, admittedly, all of these are definitely out of my comfort zone for fabric, but I just thought they'd be kind of fun for pajamas, and so I bought a bunch of them, and I kind of want to see what they're going to look like as the pajama top. So I took some photographs of the fabric laying on the ground so I could get kind of a faraway scale version of it so it's a little bit accurate. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another layer above this, and I'm going to reduce the opacity of my pajama top here. You can see it kind of reduced. So now I'm going to go back to this layer that I put on top, and I'm just going to sketch over this. So now you want to make sure for one of these methods that all of these lines are connected, but they don't have to be. There's lots of ways you can do this. I'm just going to show you the quickest way. And so just make sure that all of your lines are connected, and you can just test it by, dropping some color in here and seeing where your weaknesses are. I'm using the technical pin for most of this, nothing special. So you make sure all my edges there, and you can clean it up. Like, I definitely spent a little time making this look kind of nice just because I love to nerd out on something like this, and I find this actually kind of relaxing. Someone who went to fashion school and really did not do well at all those sketching classes is the one thing I did terrible at. I even passed out in one of my sketching classes, no joke. This is really exciting for me because I don't really have to be a really great artist. Procreate does a lot of the work for me. All right, so now we have this sketch. I'm going to get rid of the one, or you can just hide it. So here we are. And now I'm going to import my picture of my fabric. So let's pick this one here, and let's put it underneath. We're going to put it under, oops, I just duplicated that. Put it underneath your drawing there. Okay, so we're going to drop in a color in that layer with the sketch, and you can see now my fabric is behind it. See, so we're going to just enlarge it, and there we go, we're done. So now we have what this jammy top might look like, and obviously you can play around with the scale. Like, okay, I'm maybe the scale is a little bit off, and what you can do is duplicate your fabric here and then put them, let's hide this layer here, and we'll just put this over here. It won't be a perfect duplication, but at least we can kind of have a more zoomed out version of this fabric. Put these two together, kind of move them around a little bit. Let me get rid of that seam somewhere, put it somewhere a little less conspicuous. So there we go. Now we can kind of see what this jammy top might look like in this fabric right here. Kind of gives me a good idea. And obviously the coloring can be a little bit different, and on the camera to the iPad app right now, it's probably not looking quite right to you as well, but you'll know. I mean, it's going to give you a really good idea, especially if it's a large scale print or maybe something that's a color you're not sure of, and then you can kind of get a good idea, especially if you're doing anything like pattern mixing and you're just not sure, is that going to be too much? Is maybe that one little piece that you're putting on the sleeve, is that going to overpower all the others, and just is your eye just going to go straight to that? So I think that this is a really handy tool to just kind of interview things really quickly, and you can get really fast at it. All right, so if you want to kind of nerd out on it a little bit more, stick with me. I'm going to show you a few other things that you can do with this. The possibilities are kind of endless with this, and one of the things that I like is that I can group a few of the same pattern on one page, or maybe I want to do a capsule wardrobe and put a bunch of them on one page. So let's look at how we would stack these and layer them, in what order we would do it. All right, so we're going to again make a new canvas the size that you like, and then we're going to import our pattern. We still need to trace it off because we really need a clear background of it. There's a way to do it without doing that, but you will lose some of the integrity because you'd be erasing directly on your sketch. All right, so let's reduce the opacity of our original drawing. And now we're going to draw our jammy top again, making sure all the lines connect. And it's up to you if you want the back to show like this. I find that I'm used to adding that kind of look because I always made flat sketches for pattern engineering and things like that. But for something like this, you might not want to show the back because, you know, that's not really how the fabric would look right there. You'd be seeing the back of the fabric right there. So I'm just doing this really quickly. And make sure all of my corners are attached. Maybe get rid of some of these messy bits. Definitely doing this just quickly. All right, let's check it. All right, looks good. Okay, so let's make as many copies of this as we want. I'm going to make 3. And I'm going to hide the other 2 and make the one that I want a little smaller. I'll put it down here. And now I'm going to put my fabric in here. Let's create a layer first. Create a layer, put it underneath. Put it underneath. Insert your fabric. And I'm going to scale it down a little bit because that's probably truer to how this fabric will look on here. And now let's cut off all the extra fabric by just using this little tool here. We're going to cut it all as much of it off so we don't have to erase as much. So 3 fingers swipe down, and I just cut and paste a new layer, and then I get rid of this layer here. So now I have less to erase. And so now you're going to erase, and what's nice about doing it this way is you can actually erase even under the line of your drawing and you won't hurt your drawing. And sometimes if you have a lot to erase still, you can just go around and get maybe a good border around it and then do the same thing of removing it with this little magic tool here. So go around. And like I said, you can get rid of some of it a little faster by using this. Just slide it right off the board there, and it's gone. Okay. This can be a little, that seems like it can be a little tedious, but it's actually pretty satisfying. And you'll get fast at it as well. All right, so now you have this with this one here with this fabric here. And now you can pinch them and make them one layer. And now you're just going to repeat that for each of these others. And you're going to be able to stack them because this will be filled in, this layer here will be filled in with another fabric. You won't have to erase any of the lines that are overlapping with the other sketch. I'll show you what I mean by that. All right, so let's get rid of a lot of this. So once you erase all this extra fabric around that edge there and you pinch those two layers together and they're one layer like this one here is, you can put both of those, put that one layer underneath this one, and so you won't have to worry about those lines showing because you filled in the inside of that sketch. All right, and so you're going to repeat that, and then you'll have all three of your jammy tops or whatever you're going to do so you can see a bunch of them together. And it's just a quick way to do it, right? All right, let me show you one more way to do this. All right, so we're going to start with another canvas here. Okay, we can insert our sketch. We'll do this pinnacle top here, and the sketch of this top is really tiny in there. You see that? So we'll just pick this one here. That's all I want. Cut and paste into a new layer, and then I'm going to get rid of all that. So now I just have this. So I'm going to reduce the opacity, same thing. Put a layer on top of it, and I'm going to sketch this little top. And I'm going to make it longer and both sleeves short because that's how I plan on sewing it. That way I get the proportions of what I'm thinking of better. Make sure all your edges are connected, but it's not as important this time. Now, if you want to show all the top stitching lines, go for it. I can really nerd out on that kind of thing because it's just part of my background and how I used to have to do these kinds of sketches, so I really like it. But it actually doesn't really help you make your decision. It might be nice just to be able to see more of the fabric, but sometimes seeing some of those construction details does kind of break up the print, and then that way it makes it easier to sell it to yourself because you're like, okay, that's really what it's going to look like. So it just depends on what you want to do. So you can, add your top stitching here. And then I also had bought a pin and it does a dashed line, so that's kind of nice too. So you can do that. Looks pretty tiny here. There we go. All right, so let's get rid of this. And so now we have our sketch here. And I'm going to separate the back from the front so they're two separate things. And then I'm going to move it kind of behind the front here, just like this. Let's make them a little bigger here. And so these are two separate layers right now. All right, and so now what I can do is erase what I don't want to show on top of the front here, just like this. There we go. Because they're not connected yet, I can go right under that line. It makes it a lot easier. All right, and so now I'm going to pinch them together, make them one. And you might experiment with the order on how you like to do things like this because there's disadvantages and advantages to doing your layers in certain order. But this is the easiest way. So I'm just cleaning this up a little bit so it sells it a little easier to me. All right, so let's add in our fabric. And so for this one, I had two different fabric swatches. So I have this dark gray, and I want that to be under my top. So now, like I said about scale, you could really play around with the scale. Like obviously with the solid, it's probably not as critical, but if you know that that dandelion is only 3 inches across and you just scaled it up really big, you might try and, you can put your drawing assist on here and then make it in the inches that you want. So you can make it inches And then now you have like, okay, I have this 1 inch grid. And so you can kind of play around with the scale and then figure out how big those dandelions really are in relation to the garment that you're making, so that you don't end up with 2 gigantic dandelions on the legs of your pants when there would really be 100, you know? So it'll be easier to visualize it. All right, so now I'm going to cut away all the extra fabric that I don't need here. Just like I did on the multiple tops on one. That way I can add this little inset here as well. So now we're going to erase all this fabric that's outside the lines, and I'm going to erase it here too, because we're going to add in a fabric there. This was a particularly great top to do this on because I started kind of, you know, my eyes were kind of bigger than my stomach when I started looking at possible prints to pair with this solid, and I had to kind of scale it back. But, you know, why not? Maybe I could make multiples, but I only have enough of this fabric for one. So I really do need to decide. I think another thing that you can experiment also is if a pattern has more than one view and you just can't decide, like this one in particular, this V right here is quite deep and I just wasn't sure, do I really want something that deep? And I played around with the fabrics on 2 different views so I could kind of get an idea. And with the other view, with the higher neckline, it was a possibility for even a second print to go with this solid. So it would have been 3 different fabrics if I didn't want to use the same print for the neck inset and the waist inset. Okay, so now we're going to add our inset here. And I'm going to pinch these two together right now. So these are on one layer, the fabric and the sketch. And now we'll add in a couple of fabric options here. So kind of like this dandelion right here. And I know that this dandelion, those are about 3 inches tall. So what do I think is about 3 inches tall? You know, I got to kind of look at that scale. And so when I said to put your 1 inch grid on the background, you're going to have to play around with that background, this grid design assist here, the drawing guide here. You need to play around with that in relation to your garment. So if this garment right here is, say, 30 inches across, you'd probably want 60 squares in there. And so then you can kind of pick how small or big that grid is and about what you think would be the scale. There's lots of ways to do it. That might be the most visually affirming way to do it. All right, so now we have this dandelion in here. I'm gonna turn off the drawing guide. All right, and so we're going to just cut off what we don't need. We're only cutting on the dandelion layer. Okay, so now we have our dandelion there. And so maybe we want to try out a few different versions of this. So let's put this one here, and we'll put this one down here. We'll put its dandelion with it down here. Okay, so now we have a couple of options here we can try fabrics on, and we'll duplicate this one with the empty triangle there just so we have another one just in case, and we'll just hide that one for now. So let's add another fabric trial. Let's see, I think we have this poppy. Let's try and get that poppy about the right scale. What we think in relation to that shirt. Probably be about right there. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to kind of cut off all the excess. Delete that there. And now we have 2 trials here. So let's pinch these 2 together. We have this one. And we have this one, and I can decide, do I want dandelions or poppies?